The Eagles have plenty of reasons to be cautious about the Kansas City Chiefs, but none more important than Patrick Mahomes. He's not just dangerous in the playoffs, his performance in certain key areas of the Super Bowl will make it clear why the Eagles should be worried, even if they won't admit it. I'll also talk about a former Chiefs coach returning to the NFL in a surprising role, some key players to watch on the injury list, and more. But first, let's talk about something else. It's officially Super Bowl week. Both teams landed yesterday. Meanwhile, the Pro Bowl games were happening for the other teams that didn't make it to the Super Bowl. The NFC won for the third year in a row, but honestly, who really cares about the Pro Bowl anymore? It's become a bit of a joke. Sure, I'm happy for the players who make it because it helps them financially and boosts their careers. But as RBT pointed out in a tweet, it still blows my mind that I grew up watching a real Pro Bowl game, but now they're out there playing dodgeball. There were some cool moments, but let's be honest, I'm just glad the Chiefs don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Before we dive into more Super Bowl talk, here's something interesting. Former Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy is back in the NFL after coaching at UCLA last year. What's surprising is that he's returning to the NFL as a running backs coach for the first time since 2017. It's been a bit of a roller coaster for Bieniemy. After leaving the Chiefs in 2022, he became the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders, but it didn't go well. Under his leadership, the team had one of the worst offenses in the league that year, finishing 25th in scoring. After just one season, he went back to college, coaching at UCLA, but that didn't work out either. Now, it looks like he wants to return to the NFL, and Chiefs fans are watching closely to see what's next for him. There was talk about bringing Eric Bieniemy back to the Chiefs, maybe even replacing Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator next season. But that's not happening. EB is officially off the board, having been hired by the Chicago Bears yesterday as their new running backs coach. I think it's a solid move for them. EB, a former running back himself, brings a lot of coaching experience. The Bears head coach, Ben Johnson, is building up his staff, and the GM there is Ryan Poles, a former Chiefs front office member. Poles worked with Casey for 13 years before becoming the Bears GM in 2022, so maybe he played a role in bringing EB to Chicago. Either way, the talk of Bieniemy returning to KC is officially over. If the Chiefs really wanted him back, they probably could have offered him something. But it seems like the Bears running backs coaching position was the most attractive option for him. So off to Chicago he goes. Now, let's get back to Super Bowl week. There's an injury update for the Eagles that came up on Friday, one that's a bit of a surprise. Plus, we need to talk about how great Patrick Mahomes is when playing in domes, and that's exactly where Super Bowl 59 will be played. All of this happened yesterday, and it was pretty cool to see the Chiefs being escorted to the airport by the Kansas City police. Some players, like Hollywood Brown, even got a warm send-off from their neighborhood. It's awesome to see the community rallying behind the team as they head to their third Super Bowl in a row. Of course, not every player has been part of all three, but still, 7 conference championship appearances in a row is insane. It's dynasty-level stuff, and we can't take it for granted. The Chiefs made it safely to New Orleans and are getting ready for their annual opening night event tonight, Monday, February 3rd, at 7 p.m. Central. The Eagles will go first for interviews, then the Chiefs. There will be a lot of interviews all week, with nearly every player getting a chance to speak. It's a lot going on, but I'm glad many of the players are veterans at this point. The Eagles have been to a Super Bowl recently too, so they know the drill just as well. Several players will be making their first ever Super Bowl appearance, and I'm talking about Chiefs players here. Of course, there are the rookies, like Kingsley Worthy and Jared Wye, who tore his ACL, along with others, including UDFA players. But there are also some key veterans worth mentioning. You've got Hollywood Brown, Kareem Hunt, and DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins shared a powerful message today on his X account, especially for the kids out there who come from small towns or tough situations. He said, "To all the kids living in small houses with single parents, to those who see violence, loss, and don't get the resources they deserve, but still have big dreams, know that I was a kid in your shoes. This week, I'm playing in the Super Bowl. Don't give up, keep working hard, and keep believing. Where you start doesn't determine where you end up." That's such an inspiring message from D-Hop to anyone who dreams of greatness. It doesn't matter where you come from. If you work hard and stay focused, you can make it. It's incredible to see his rise, and I hope he gets his first Super Bowl ring this Sunday. Now, there's a lot happening during Super Bowl week, and it can be easy to get distracted. But the game plans were set last week, followed by a regular week of practice. The injury report is out with some key players listed as questionable. While it's still a week away and things could change, there are a few players for the Eagles to keep an eye on, as well as one Chiefs player I'll mention soon. 4 Eagles players are listed as questionable, with 3 of them having their 21-day window to return from IR open: tight end C.J. Amos, defensive end Brandon Graham, and wide receiver Britton Covey. It's unclear how many of them will return, but the most important one to me is Brandon Graham. He tore his triceps late in November, and if he returns, even on a limited snap count, it would definitely help their defensive line. Back in 2008, defensive tackle Hollis Thomas tore his triceps and returned to play in just 2.5 months, so Brandon Graham could absolutely play this Sunday, though we're not sure how much. Another player worth watching is running back Kenneth Gainwell, who is listed as questionable after suffering a concussion in the third quarter of the NFC Championship game. Kenneth Gainwell is still in concussion protocol, but the good news is that he has an extra week to clear it before the Super Bowl. Gainwell finished the regular season with 75 carries for 290 yards, which was third on the team behind Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. So, if he clears protocol in time, he definitely has a role to play in the Eagles' offense. Now, let's talk about a few more Eagles players. Center Cam Jurgens, guard Landon Dickerson, who has a knee issue, and linebacker Zach Bond are all important to keep an eye on. Jurgens and Dickerson didn't practice last week, both dealing with injuries from the NFC Championship game. Jurgens dressed for the game but didn't play unless needed. Dickerson took over at center, but his knee was bothering him so much that he had to leave the game. Jurgens had to step back in and finish it out. I'm sure both of these guys will play, but the big question is, how close to 100% will they be? If their interior line is a little banged up, I'd expect Chris Jones, Turk Wharton, or any of the Chiefs' defensive linemen to make some key plays in the second half of the game. The most interesting player on the Eagles' injury list is linebacker Zach Bond, who was a first-team All-Pro this season. He practiced fully all week, but then, on Friday, he showed up with a groin injury. We don't know how serious it is, but he didn't practice with the rest of the team. I'm sure he'll push through and play, but if that groin injury worsens, it could limit his explosiveness. Losing him would be a tough blow for the Eagles. Bond leads the team in forced fumbles with 5, total tackles with 150, and is second in tackles for loss with 11, just behind Jalen Carter. He also has 14 QB pressures and played 95% of the snaps this season. In the playoffs, he's been even more of a force, with 26 tackles, 2 for loss, forced a fumble, recovered 2 fumbles, broke up 2 passes, and even grabbed an interception. He's a huge playmaker, and his health will definitely be something to watch this week. If Zach Bond can't go, that could make things tougher for the Eagles, especially with the amount of zone coverage they run. That could open up opportunities for Travis Kelce in the middle of the field. Now, when we look at the Chiefs, their players seem to be in great shape compared to the Eagles. This is where having a first-round bye was really important because the difference in the injury reports is pretty striking. The Eagles have 15 players listed, while the Chiefs only have 5. Those 5 are safety Brian Cook, quad, quarterback Patrick Mahomes, ankle, right tackle Jawan Taylor, knee, cornerback Jalen Watson, ankle, and wide receiver Sky Moore, abdomen. The first 4 players were full participants in practice all week and will definitely play in the game, so I'm not concerned about any of them. As for Sky Moore, his 21-day window to return from IR opened last week. People were a bit confused about it. But when the window opens, it means the player can start practicing with the team. According to Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest, Moore being listed as doubtful means he most likely won't be added back to the 53-man roster from IR, but he'll still help the team prepare as part of the scout team. So, don't expect a Sky Moore corndog touchdown in this Super Bowl. Sorry, Philly fans. Now let's talk about something very interesting. Patrick Mahomes' record in dome stadiums. He's actually undefeated, 12-0 to be exact. There was one loss to the Colts in 2022, but the roof in their stadium was open, so we can ignore that one. Let's dive into the stats, and they get even crazier. In those 12 games, Mahomes has a completion percentage of 66.46%, a passer rating of 103.7, 3,600-plus passing yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. That averages out to 304 yards per game, 2.16 touchdowns, and just 0.33 interceptions per game when playing in a dome. On the ground, Mahomes has 49 rushing attempts for 283 yards, almost 6 yards per carry. This isn't just about dome games, but if we keep looking at his rushing stats, in his 4 Super Bowl appearances, he averages almost the same 6 yards per attempt. And in the playoffs, he's had 7 postseason rushing touchdowns and averages a first down nearly 40% of the time when he scrambles. As we saw just last week, Mahomes can use his legs in designed quarterback runs, even though they don't call them that often. Mahomes even ran 2 touchdowns himself in the AFC Championship. When you combine his playoff rushing stats with his average passing stats and add a little bit of his dome performance stats, it's clear that we're in for an unforgettable performance from Patrick Mahomes in this Super Bowl. Now, I know some of you might look at that dome stat and say, who cares? This is the Eagles. They're a great defense. And yes, Mahomes hasn't faced a passing defense like this in a while. But would you believe me if I told you that in the playoffs, Mahomes is 3-0 against the number 1 passing defenses? Let's take a look at the stats. Tom Brady is 2-1, Peyton Manning is 1-1, and Steve Young and Len Dawson are also 1-1, so it's safe to say that it doesn't really matter. When you combine Mahomes being in a dome, with no weather conditions to worry about, and the Eagles' amazing defense, it's clear that Mahomes has faced tough defenses before and still managed to shine. In fact, check out this stat from NFL Network. Mahomes' numbers against the number 1 passing defense in his playoff games are insane. He's averaging 37 points per game, is 3-0 in those games, and has a completion percentage of 70.8%. He averages 2.7 passing touchdowns per game and a 108.5 passer rating. Those stats rank first among all quarterbacks who've had 2 or more playoff starts against a number 1 passing defense since 1950. That's a lot of history on the line in this game. Now, let's talk about the history for both quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts has the chance to become the first quarterback to lose his first Super Bowl appearance and then return to win one. If the Eagles win, Hurts will be the first to do this since John Elway. Out of the last 19 quarterbacks who lost their first Super Bowl, none made it back, so Hurts is already making history. On the other hand, Andy Reid is just 4 wins behind Bill Belichick for the most playoff wins by a head coach. A win on Sunday would make him just 3 behind Bill. In terms of Super Bowl wins, Big Red is tied with Joe Gibbs and Bill Walsh with 3, but a 4th win would tie him with Chuck Noll for second most Super Bowl wins by a coach, just 2 behind Bill Belichick. And, of course, for Patrick Mahomes, if he helps his team win their 3rd Super Bowl, it would cement his place in the GOAT conversation. No one has ever done that before, so this game is a huge moment in history.